So thank you so much, Michael, for joining us. And over to you.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much, Prati and James, for organizing this and having me. It's great to be here.
Thank you.
So let me just share my screen and we'll get started. So as Prati mentioned, this session is going to be about the best practice rules that we launched on the powerbi.com blog. And I have that blog up here. We'll make sure that the link for the blog is available. Just some context here. We published these rules back in February, and these best practice rules are in a culmination of knowledge from working with customers, enterprise customers, over years, and identifying best practices with regards to both modeling, design, performance, and synthesizing those into a set of rules which can be run on any model, whether it's a model built in Power BI Desktop, a model built for Power BI Premium, analysis services, Azure analysis services, any of those models, and these rules will run and scan your model instantly, giving you feedback which you can use as a first step in improving your model, both with regard to its design, performance, as well as aesthetics and formatting. So I'll let folks they can read the blog offline. There is a link to the blog on the blog. There is a link to the GitHub repository, the analysis services GitHub, where the actual rules are stored, where you can download them and actually apply them. So here I've navigated to the GitHub page, and the rules are this BPAR rules.json file. And if we scroll down, you can see that there's a few ways to actually install the rules. And so, you know, these rules run in Tabular Editor. Now, Tabular Editor, if you're not familiar with, there's two versions of it, Tabular Editor 2, which is an open source product, and Tabular Editor 3, which is a commercial product. These rules work for both Tabular Editor 2 and 3. And as long as you have that installed, you'll be able to leverage these rules. So let's get started, and let me show you how to actually load these rules. So I prefer the automated method because it's just a little bit slicker and faster. So on the GitHub page, you can just copy this bit of code here and open up Tabular Editor. And in Tabular Editor, you have two panes here on the right. One is Expression Editor, which is for DAX and stuff like that, and one is the Advanced Scripting. So we go to the Advanced Scripting tab, and we can just paste in that code that we copied from GitHub. And to load the rules in Tabular Editor, all we have to do is click play, and then close out of Tabular Editor, reopen it, and the rules will have loaded. Now we're updating these rules on a pretty consistent basis. Actually, if we go back to the GitHub page, we scroll down to the bottom, you can see a version history where it shows all the changes we've made since we first released it on February 3rd of this year. And so there's been many, many changes. And so you want to make sure that you're always using the latest version. And so one way to ensure that you're doing that is to save this script here. So what you can do is you can click on the plus button that opens up a window where you can give this little script a name. Let's call it load BPA rules. And we'll click on model, click OK. And it's going to delete this. Now, if we go to samples, custom actions, we now see the action that we just saved. So we click this, and bam, we have that code. We can run it, and running it will always retrieve the latest version. So you can make sure that you're always up to date. One thing to note is that running this script will overwrite any existing best practice rules file. So if you're already using the best practice analyzer in Tabular Editor, you'll want to back up your current file because this one would overwrite it. So just want to make sure you don't lose any work that you have done already. So as I mentioned, here I have actually connected to a local BIM file, but this can also, as I mentioned, work for against a model built in Power BI Desktop. So I'll just briefly show that. So if you have here, we have a modeled report in Power BI Desktop. If we navigate to the External Tools tab, we can click on Tabular Editor or Tabular Editor 3, as long as we have them installed. And launching that will actually launch this same, it will load your model inside of Tabular Editor and allow you to run the rules. So I've actually already run the rules, so I don't need to run this code. But let me tell you how to actually run the rules. There's a few ways to do it. So first, we can go to File, Preferences, and there's an option here under this category for background scan for best practice issues. If we check that and we click OK, Tabular Editor will actually run the best practice rules consistently and show here down at the bottom a link to show how many rules have been violated. And we can click on this and it pops up a window with the best practice analyzer. Now, if you have a large model with many tables and many measures, this may take a little bit of extra bandwidth and may slow down the experience of using the best practice analyzer, so of using Tabular Editor in general. So for large models, I recommend not to have this setting on, but we can still naturally leverage the best practice analyzer without using that particular method. So we can still go to Tools, Best Practice Analyzer, and since we already run it, it shows we can click this refresh icon, and it will rerun the rules. I always like to collapse the rules so I can see just to see it better. And so each of these is a rule, and it shows how many objects broke that particular rule or violated that rule. And as you can see, we've put these into categories. Here you have performance, static expressions, error prevention, maintenance, formatting, and they're somewhat in a prioritized order. Granted that performance is probably more important or more relevant than formatting, although we'll talk about how that can be not necessarily the case a bit later, so some folks are asking, how should we prioritize which rules to start with? Because there's over 60 rules now, and it may seem like a lot. So generally speaking, I would work top down because that's the way we built it, as far as performance and text expressions being at the top, generally more important than things like formatting. So if you read the rule name, you may not have the full context as to what the rule actually means, but don't be worried. You can actually get much more information about that particular rule. So if we actually hover over a particular object within the rule, then it gives a tooltip which gives a description showing much more information about the rule. But we can navigate to get that in a bit easier format by clicking this Manage Rules or going to Tools, Manage BPA Rules. Both do the same thing. So if we click there and we go to Rules for the local user, we will see all the rules, and we can click on a particular rule. go to Edit Rule. And here we get not just the rule name, we get the full description, which was shown in the tooltip on Hover earlier. And this description is really important for folks to read. Without reading the description, you may not have proper context as to the rules. And I can't stress enough how important it is to read the descriptions. Additionally, for many rules, we've also included a reference article, which is either a document, in this case, published by Microsoft, or a blog post or article or video published by an MVP. And that article will give much more context as to why the rule is important, why it should be followed, and super important to read that. You'll also notice things here like severity. In the context of Tabular Editor, the severity level does not really play much of a role, but where it does play a role is that Tabular Editor has a functionality of being able to deploy a model through the command line. And part of that process is you're actually able to run the best practice rules and best practice analyzer via the command line deployment. So in that case, if you have a severity level 3 or higher rule that is violated, it will actually fail the deployment. If it's level 2, it will show a warning, and if it's level 1, it's the lowest level rule, which will not show a warning. And I just want to highlight that functionality of being able to deploy and run the best practice rules from the command line is really, really powerful. You can integrate it into tools like Azure DevOps to have automated deployments and checking your model that these rules are followed. If you have a large group of developers, this is a great way of ensuring quality for your models, that things that violate these rules don't go into production. You'll also see here a bit of code. This code encapsulates the rule, and if you're looking to create your own rules, which I definitely suggest, you can use these rules in the code here as examples from which to learn from to create your own rules. There's, as I said, there's over 60 rules, and you can use these. There's many types of rules which use different strategies in the code, and they should be pretty helpful as far as creating your own rules. And by the way, if you have suggestions for rules, feel free to post them on the GitHub site as issues, or if you have actual issues with the rules, and we'd be happy to take those as feedback and potentially even integrate them into the best practice rules. Okay. Now that we've kind of done some of that housekeeping, let's actually get into the rules and talk about how we actually work with the rules. So let's take this rule here as an example. This rule is to not use floating point data types. Floating point data types, so you know, are data types that have many decimal points, and oftentimes having those many decimal points is actually not necessary. You could get away with, say, a currency data type, which is only 4 decimal points, which would save the amount of space that column takes up in memory. So if we double click on a particular, in this case, column, then it'll navigate to that particular column. And we can see here in the properties window that it is a double or floating point data type. Okay, interesting. And so if we want to actually fix this, some rules are simple enough that we can actually fix them through the best practice analyzer itself. Some rules, actually most rules, are a bit more complicated and are not able to be fixed. If a rule is able to be fixed through Tabular Editor or through the best practice analyzer, then we will see these two icons as editable. If not, say, for example, over here, they will show as grayed out. So we come back here to this rule. We can actually even right-click and select all of these. If we right-click here, we can either generate a fix script or apply fix. I recommend starting with generate fix script, so let's do that. We click that, and it says that a fix script has been copied to the clipboard. We can paste it into the advanced script editor for review. So click OK. We go to the same advanced scripting window, we paste, and we see this code, which is C#/Tom. And this code, if we click the play button, just as we did when we were loading the rules, it will actually change the data type for these 5 columns from a floating point to a decimal. So if we click play, we'll see that here for this column, as well as the other 4 columns, that it's changed to decimal. One cool thing about Tabular Editor is that we can go to edit and show history, and it'll actually show that we ran this script and we made these particular changes. So it keeps a log of all the changes that we've made. And if we did this by accident, we made a mistake, we didn't mean to actually run this, we, just as we would expect, we can do Control-Z or File Undo, and this has gone back to double. So along with the generate fix script, we also have apply fix. Apply fix simply runs the code that was generated without actually generating it for you and pasting it to the advanced scripting window. So we can click apply fix, and you'll see now that it's changed to decimal. And if we refresh the best practice analyzer, you'll see that that rule is now gone because all of the columns and objects apply, they follow the rule. So essentially we've cleaned up that particular rule. That being said, I want to say the first thing you should do is read the description and read the article within the description for the rule. Once you've understood that context, then you can try the generate fix script and see exactly what the fix script is doing. And then once you know that, you can start using the apply fix. But I would not recommend and just do not just click apply fix for all of the objects within the rules that have that. You want to understand what the fix is doing and what the rule is about. You know, in some cases, you may not actually want, the rule may not apply for that particular object in your case. You know, for example, you may need the precision of a floating point for a particular column, in which case you wouldn't want to run this rule, and then applying the fix on it would actually potentially cause you a problem. So and in actuality, if say a particular column, say in this case the weight column, it should be a floating point, and it you want the best practice analyzer to actually ignore this particular column. You don't want to be bothered by it all the time. You can either click this little I button or right click and say ignore item, and then it will actually not show you that particular column anymore, and you won't have to worry about it. That being said, you can click on show ignored, and it'll come back in gray so that you didn't completely forget about it. So I want to discuss now. I hinted at briefly how we have different categories for rules, and that in generally you want to follow performance and DAX expressions are higher importance than say rules around formatting. But that's not necessarily always the case. The reason why is that some of the rules have some overlap in that and some dependencies. And so I'll show you what I mean by that. Let's take a more seemingly innocuous rule here of hiding foreign keys, or say hiding fact table columns. It's a formatting rule. How could it impact performance? It seems like hiding a column is not going to improve performance, but I'll tell you, it has an indirect impact on performance. I'll show you how. There are two rules in particular, which I believe are very important. One of them is remove unnecessary columns, which we will open up here. This rule shows you columns which are not really used in your model at all and are also hidden. They're not used in any kind of measures. They're not used in any relationships, sort by, hierarchies, rule of security, and they're hidden, so they wouldn't actually be used in reports. And so they could be removed without really any impact downstream to your users. And following this rule, you may be able to remove many columns, which would reduce the memory footprint of your model, which would speed up processing and just provide a better experience for your users. So here's the thing: if you don't follow the rule of hiding fact table columns, then this rule of removing unnecessary columns will not be effective at all, because it only works when columns are hidden. So for all those models out there that have no hidden columns, everything is visible, you will unfortunately not be able to take advantage of this particular rule. So the suggestion is hide the appropriate columns as per those two formatting rules, and then you'll be able to make more effective use of this rule, as well as another rule, which is the set is available and index to false rule. So this rule is a bit more advanced, but with every column that is in your model, there's an attribute hierarchy that is built, which takes up space, and that is not always necessary. And this rule tells you which columns where you don't actually have to have that attribute hierarchy. And you can set this property to false to save Power BI from creating that hierarchy, therefore saving space in your model and making your model process faster. Again, like the remove unnecessary columns, this rule relies on, as you can see here, the column or the table being hidden. So if you don't hide columns in your model that are supposed to be hidden, then you will not be able to take advantage of this rule. And this rule, by the way, it seems pretty, the topic is a bit more advanced and it seems a bit more esoteric, but it provides a lot of value. In fact, I have seen one case of a model where the model was literally shrunk almost in half by following this rule alone, as far as memory size. So it's quite important. So that illustrates, like, not to take any particular rule for granted, or to think that a particular rule is less important than another rule. You can see even these formatting rules can have more consequences than at first meets the eye.
Michael, sorry to interrupt. I think we have a couple of questions. Do you want to take them now, or?
Sure. Yeah.
Pranam, do you mind unmuting yourself and ask your question? Or okay, whoever have the question. Yeah, go on.
Okay, sorry about that. Are you able to hear me now?
We can hear
Yes.
you.
Yes, Michael, are the fixed scripts available on GitHub? Because one of the script, for example, I ran this recently, and I think for the percentages, there is a script that runs, but basically I'm not able to access that because it throws up an error every time I try to do that. I'm not able to even copy that to my clipboard. So I really don't know what the fixed script is. So I just wanted to ask if there is a way to access the actual fixed script so that I can run it on my own.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you go back to GitHub and you open up the BPA rules.json, this is the actual file that's loaded into Tabular Editor. You can see here each clause is a particular rule, and if there is a fixed expression, it's located here. So not all the rules have one. So in this case here, you see there's just an expression, but no fixed expression. So you can come in here, find the rule, and find the fixed expression. And this essentially gives you the code that you would need, a bit of a shorthand to run. At the same time, like you can also just do the generate fixed script, and it will give you the full code. In fact, the code in the JSON, as far as the fixed script, is just essentially from here. As you can see, the part from the period to the left is generated dynamically by Tabular Editor with regard to the table and the column name in this case. And on the right is directly from this bit of code here.
Thanks, Michael. That's helpful. Also, do I have to run the BPA rules every time I say refresh the data model and re-import the data? So for example, if I'm importing some data on a monthly basis, do I have to do that every time I refresh the data model? Or is it that once I fixed it and I publish it, then during the refresh cycles, these rules hold actually, or the fixes hold?
Well, the fixes will hold once you make the change. I mean, that's just like making a change, any development change. You can rerun the rules anytime you want to. The rules in general are about the model itself, not about the data itself. So by refreshing the data, it's not going to impact the rules in general. That being said, I'm about to cover some more advanced rules, which actually do look at some of the data. So in that case, refreshing the data would impact some of these other more advanced rules. I'll discuss how that works in a bit.
Okay, thank you for that.
Michael, I've got a quick question for you. You were talking about earlier where when you update your rule set, it'll you need to sort of keep a history of your original rules and then supersede it with the latest ones. Obviously, if you've got custom rules that you've created as a user, is there a way of saving those down and then merging those back in with the new rules that you've got, that you've then just had an update from GitHub?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's no tool to just merge two sets of rules right now, but if you think about it, it's just all these rules files is a set of it's just a JSON file. So you could just essentially copy rules from one script to another by just appending them at the bottom or appending them wherever. Or if you want to get more fancy, to be able to create some kind of tool which merges two JSON rule files.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah, you could get. I was just wondering as to whether they would ever have, so for example, they want to avoid floating point data types for argument's sake, as to whether any of the rules potentially might have a name change between version, say, 4 and 5 or version 4 and 6 or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, if you look here, so if there's a name change, and I know that there was one I had here, this one says new name, this one says new name. So in general, I try to keep the names the same, even if we update them to be better code. But sometimes they fundamentally change. In this case, you change from objects with no description to visible objects with no description. So I felt it was important to clarify in the title, in the name itself, that it was visible objects. So that's why I changed the name. But in general, like I said, I try to keep the name the same.
Okay.
And
Cool.
it should be noted that in one of these files, you can only have one rule with one name. Actually, I'm not sure if it's one name or one, like the ID has to be unique. You can't have two that have this exact ID. That's for sure.
Okay, cool. No, great. Thanks very much.
Sure.
Thank you, Michael. I think that's all for now.
Okay. Great. So with that, with the question, I want to lead into some more advanced rules. So actually navigate back to GitHub. And if we scroll down to this notes section, we'll see that there's additional rules which are in the same file. So they're already loaded into Tabular Editor if you load the rules. But these rules are a bit more advanced, and they require additional metadata. And if you're familiar with Vertipack Analyzer, they leverage that data. Vertipack Analyzer is an open source tool created by SQL BI and is also now housed within DAX Studio as well as Tabular Editor 3. And have a script to actually load the Vertipack Analyzer data into Tabular Editor, so we're able to use that as additional information to check your model. Now, just briefly, the Vertipack Analyzer data shows information like how many rows are in a particular table, how many distinct values or unique values are in a particular column, how much space in megabytes or in bytes each column or each table takes up, that type of information, which is really valuable to analyze. And in this way, we're able to analyze that in a more automated fashion. So, so let me show you how to do that. So there's actually two ways to load Vertipack Analyzer data into Tabular Editor. One is if you're connected in Tabular Editor directly to a server, and that can be to a Power BI desktop through external tools. It can be to an analysis services instance, Azure Analysis Services, Power BI Premium Workspace, dataset. All those will work. There's instructions here as a blog post and a script. You can also load Vertipack Analyzer data from a Vertipack Analyzer or VPEX file. We're going to do the former. So I'm going to click on this script. And just want to forewarn, like, just don't be intimidated by the amount of code here. We're just copying and pasting. So click on raw. We're going to copy this. And as I mentioned, to run this, you need to be connected to an actual analysis services instance. So I'm going to connect to my local analysis services and basically the same model, and just paste in this code in the advanced scripting window, the same window we've been using the whole time. And then, as I said, we're just doing copying and pasting, copy, paste, and play. So we just click play. And now it has run, and we can, just to show you what this is actually done, we can go navigate to a table in the properties pane, open up annotations, and we will see these new annotations, which are just essentially notes, which don't affect the model at all. They're safe. And for VertiPack, so VertiPack row count, this shows how many rows are in this particular table by actually looking at the data. Of course, you have to have your model processed for this to work effectively. The table size, which is the number of bytes that table takes up, as well as the, in this case, the percent of the model that this table takes up. So this table takes up 49% of the model. So if there was a place we want to optimize, it probably would be good to start here. We can also navigate to various elements of our model, say a column. We can see all these cool stats that we would find in VertiPack Analyzer. Now they're available as model metadata. You can navigate to partitions, you can navigate relationships. All these things have these new annotations. And now it's about finding ways to leverage those annotations. So one way is through these rules. So these 5 rules leverage that information. In fact, one of them is this fix referential integrity violations. This is a very fancy name, but essentially what it is when you say you load a slicer from your model into Power Desktop as a visual, and you see that there's a blank member, the dreaded blank member. That's because of a referential integrity violation, essentially where a value in a fact table does not exist in a related dimension table. So we can run these rules. And we actually see here that this has picked up this referential integrity violation because, as we'll see, it's looked at the VertiPack Analyzer data. So if we go to Manage Rules, Rules for Local User, we'll find that particular rule in Maintenance, Fix Referential Integrity Violations, edit the rule. And if we look here at the code, we see that it's actually looking at the annotation for VertiPack RI violation invalid rows where it's greater than 0. And so this wouldn't be possible. Taking advantage of this rule would not be possible if we didn't load the VertiPack Analyzer data into Tabular Editor. So it's stuff like this that is now made really easy. And once you know about that issue, it highlights the relationship. You can then go into your data warehouse, find the value that it shouldn't be in the fact table or should be in the dimension table, fix it, and then reprocess your data. And then you'll be able to rerun the best practice rules and see that this rule violation goes away. One thing that people oftentimes want to know is, along with the priority of which rules to follow first, is to be able to prioritize within a particular rule which objects are most important, like prioritizing which columns. Say, for example, if we removed a particular, we have 10 columns we could remove, which column would be most, would save us the most. So we've actually created a script for that. And it also leverages the VertiPack Analyzer data. So now that we've had that loaded, I can show you that. So if we come back up to GitHub and we navigate to here, I have this link to this blog post where we can quantify the savings for following specific best practice rules. If we click here, we'll go to my blog, Elegant BI. And if we scroll down, we will see that for these 2 rules, we actually can quantify the savings for following them. In this case, we're quantifying the memory savings for removing particular unnecessary columns or following the set is available in MDX to false rule. As I've mentioned before, that these scripts require the VertiPack Analyzer data to be loaded in first. So those links are also here. we can click on, say, for example, this link here, and it navigates us to this code. We can copy this code and go back to Tabular Editor, paste this code into the advanced scripting window. And when we run this code, I'll show you here that we have, this is for remove unnecessary columns. So we have 53 columns we could remove. Which columns would be best to remove first? So we would save the most space. So we can click play. And we get the first output is the total number of bytes that we would save if we removed all of those columns, all 53 columns. If we close this, the second output that we get is a list of all the columns and their respective tables, as well as the column size in bytes of how much space each column takes up. All I have to do is copy this clip to the clipboard, paste it into Excel, sort it descending by column size, and we now have a prioritized list of which columns we can remove to save the most amount of space. Again, only possible because we have the Vertipec analyzer data inside of Tabular Editor. Okay, now I want to show one other thing, and that is that we've shown how the best practice rules can be run either from tools, best practice analyzer, or file preferences and having them run behind the scenes and shows down here. There's another way of running the best practice rules that provides us to a way to actually export those rules. And so I'm going to show that now. I have a blog post on this where I give the script as well as the script is on my GitHub. We'll post both those links into the chat. We can just copy this code and we'll see what this does. We click play. And this outputs essentially all the rules that were caught, all the violations that were caught in the best practice analyzer. It now outputs it in a way that we can copy to the clipboard again, paste into Excel, and interact with this in a different way, in a potentially more user-friendly experience to be able to say filter, only the performance category rules, or only severity level 3 rules, or only rules that have a fixed expression. We can do all that in Excel and then come back into the best practice analyzer and use it as we know. So just another way to interact with the best practice analyzer and to have it in a more tangible format for us to use. And so, yeah, that pretty much concludes what I want to cover in this session. If there's any questions, be happy to take them.
Оставь.
I think we do have some questions. I think who is that? Whoever has questions, could you please unmute yourself?
And while we're taking questions, I just realized I want to also call out On the GitHub page, we have a section here for feedback. We would love your feedback on one, if these rules have helped your organization. You can email us at this email, pbi.bestpractice@microsoft.com. We'd love to hear from you, as well as if you find any issues with the rules or you have suggestions for new rules, you can submit an issue within this repository. Just be sure to prefix it with the BPA rules so we can track it more easily. To do that, you can just go to the issues and click new issue.
Hi, Michael. Pranam here. I had one other query regarding these issues. I get this, issue every time I refresh my dataset. It's called objects with no description. Basically, if you have a column and it doesn't have a description, this pops up. But every time I update it, but I refresh, say by re-importing the data, I get the same, issue. So I was wondering, is there an option to import these descriptions while importing from the data source itself during data refresh, or is it something that maybe it might not really matter?
Are you saying that the descriptions that you put in don't actually stay, that they go away?
They stay as long as I do not re-import the data or do a data refresh. So they stay, then the errors are out. But if, for example, I have to make another change into the data model, so I open it, I make that, maybe I import another table or some additional data, then I run my BPA issues, I get these same issues where the descriptions are not persistent. That means that every time I import it, my old descriptions are gone.
Okay, and so just to clarify, your model is built in Power BI Desktop.
Yes, it's
Correct?
built in Power BI Desktop, yes.
So when your model is built in Power BI Desktop, one thing that you have to set when you're using these rules, although you have to be careful with it because you can get into trouble, is that go to File Preferences and check this, Allow Unsupported Power BI Features Experimental. If you don't check this, then all the changes that you make in Tabular Editor will not save back into Power BI Desktop. So you'll be doing the work over and over again, and it'll be fruitless. So check that box, and then the descriptions will stay, and you will not have to repeat the process over and over again. That being said, you want to be careful with this because it allows you to do now anything in Tabular Editor, and there are only a limited amount of actions that you can do in Tabular Editor or third-party tools that are supported back into Power BI Desktop. So you want to be careful not to do things like, changing a table name, adding a column, removing a column, adding a table. You can't do those types of operations in Tabular Editor or third-party tools. It will cause the PBX to break. So just be careful with that, but you'll need to check this in order to have your changes actually carry forward back into Power BI Desktop.
Sure, Michael. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any more questions? If so, feel free to come off mic and jump in. No, it's not looking like it. Unless somebody's going to jump in and interrupt me, feel free. Otherwise,
hey, I've got a quick question. Michael, what's the #1 thing you see people doing wrong when they start to use Tabular Editor that we should not do wrong?
Hey, Chris, you mean specifically with the best practice analyzer?
Sure.
I mean, so first thing is people don't read the descriptions or the reference articles. They read the titles and they don't understand it, and then maybe they get a bit frustrated and they could stop using it.
So you're saying we have to read the manual?
Have to read. Yes, I know. It's going back to basics, but
okay.
I found that is knowledge is power, as they say. So we try to make this easy and have a lot of the information there. These rules are. It's not just me that was creating these rules. That these rules have been codified by many folks across different disciplines into Power BI, and we put a lot of effort into this to make not only the rules robust, but also the information about the rules robust as well. So you have a lot of this context, which is like literally an expert in a box, having the rules as well as all the context behind the rules. So don't forget to read the context.
That's awesome. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, Chris. And thanks, Chris, as well for answering a lot of questions as we've been going through the session too. Any last questions before we wrap up?
Just a quick comment on that, Michael, that you're saying about the rule set and things. What I found sometimes is reading the rule set or the definition is not that easy to understand at times. You've really got to read it over and over and over and over again. And I think for some people who are just starting out with it, that could get very frustrating if they can't really understand exactly what the description says and what the rule is actually, or how to interpret that rule.
Yeah, and that's great feedback. So here's the thing: read the rule description, read the article, the reference article, and if you still don't know, you're still confused about the rule. If you don't know, ask. So make an issue on GitHub and say, hey, this particular rule, it's not clear. I read the description, I read the article, and I still don't understand it. Can you make the description or the article clearer so even a novice can understand it?
Yeah, because sort of, and one of the things that I've found is sort of, particularly for non-native English speakers, that it can be a challenge for some of those people as well, because often we'll write rules as English native speakers, but then you'll find that for a non-native English speaker, it could be a challenge. But yeah, I'll sort of log them on the GitHub and let you guys know if there's stuff that I struggle to understand.
Sure. At the same time, we have an international community, and I've seen when I first published the PowerBI.com blog on the best practice rules, it was immediately translated into Spanish, I believe also into French by various folks in the community, which is amazing because it allows folks that may not understand English to now understand. They don't have to use like Google Translate to read this. So that's also been super helpful. But the main point here is if we don't have the feedback on, then we can't make the changes. So provide the feedback on GitHub, and we'd be happy to make this more accessible for a broader audience.
Yeah, I take that. I take that. Obviously, it's just interest. At least finding that is a good thing. Is that you can't fix it if no one tells you.
Exactly. So I appreciate the feedback. So, like I said, but be specific on like this particular rule is not clear. Don't say like, hey, none of the rules are clear. Like we need like specifics is always helpful. So.
Oh, of course, yeah. I would definitely say this exact rule. This is sort of how I interpreted it, or could you try and sort of reword it?
Definitely. Sometimes, I mean, just kind of being in our areas, where we're so deep into Power BI, we may say it in a way that someone starting out just doesn't have the technical aptitude to really understand it in using those terms. So you can try to put it into, use less jargon and put in simpler terms that everyone can understand. So.
Cool. I think everybody in the Power BI world is guilty of that sometimes.
Yeah. We think everyone knows what we know, and it's not always the case because we've learned over the years. So. Yep.
Brilliant. Well, thank you ever so much, Michael. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for lots of questions as well. We are at the top of the hour and out of time. So again, thank you very much. We will post the video along with the links as well for Michael's blog and the GitHub repo as well on our YouTube site. In fact, let me share my screen so you can get the link for that as well. I've posted it in the chat. Click the button. There we go. Just so you've got the links. And if you've got any more comments or feedback, also I will keep an eye on the chat for the next hour or so as well. So feel free to pop any feedback in there and we can pass it along. Thanks everybody for joining, and thanks again, Michael.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone. Oh, I should mention the next session in November is just being finalised. I won't announce the speaker just yet, but we will follow up very shortly with the details for November's London Power BI user group session, which will be our last one before going back to in-person events as well as online streaming, as Prafi mentioned at the start. So thanks again, everyone, and we'll speak soon.
Bye, everyone. Thank you, Michael.